Councillors, could I ask you to be upstanding for the Mayor, please?
Thank you, councillors. Please be seated. Welcome everyone to this meeting of Waverley Borough Council. I will go through the normal housekeeping fairly quickly. Members know, please raise your hands and indicate if you wish to speak, and hopefully we will pick you up and call you. We are obviously using the microphones, and you all know how to use your own microphones. And we will be using the electronic voting system, for which I'm sure you're all familiar. But when the little lights come on, hopefully abstain will be in the middle, against will be on the right, and therefore in favour will be on the left, but they are hopefully coloured, but some of the colours have faded a little. If there is a recorded vote, provided it is supported by the correct number, which is 4 other members, we will go to a roll call as normal. This is being webcast, so please observe decorum and do not say things which you would not like your grandmother to hear. Speeches will be strictly timed to 4 minutes, but I hope we don't all take it. But you will be given a 30-second warning before the end of the time of your speech. And I remind you, members may only speak once on any item. If you're making a point of order, please be very clear what it's about and which law or rule of the council you think is being broken. Thank you very much. Could I now go to apologies for absence? Ben, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You have apologies for absence this evening from councillors Atkins, Clark, Hess, Lawton, Mirrlees, Ken Reid, Ruth Reid, Liz Townsend and Weldon.
Thank you very much. We now come to declarations of interest. We do have 2 motions. We do have 2 items, a motion and an item here, which members may think affects them. But I have spoken to the monitoring officer and I have had legal advice from the borough solicitor that you do not need to declare an interest in either the Band H debate or the fuel allowance debate, because that is not required. So apart from that, do we have any declarations of interest in advance, Ben?
There were none.
Thank you very much. Any declarations last minute from any councillors? Thank you very much. Let's move on. The minutes of the last meeting have been circulated with your agenda and have laid on the table for the requisite time. Does anybody have any factual errors that they wish to draw to our attention? In which case I would propose that the minutes be accepted, and I hope to have a seconder.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, please second.
Thank you very much, Leader. Can we do that by acclamation? Is that agreed? Yes. Thank you very much, Councillor. I will sign them after the meeting. We now move on to announcements. First of all, from myself, I will keep it brief. In the interim from the last council meeting, I and most of the Surrey mayors had tea with the Lord Lieutenant, which is always an interesting time to meet informally and look round the very lovely house that's been in their family for some time. I have been to see both the Air Cadets and the Army Cadets, and it's always very heartening. We hear a lot about what's wrong with young people today, but the confidence, discipline, and general politeness of these groups of people really show young people up in a very good light. I also raised the Ukraine flag here and attended the Ukrainian event here in Godalming, which was very well supported. And I was just amazed how grateful these Ukrainians who are here think of it. I said to one group of people, it's just a small thing raising the flag. And they said, no, it's not. It's a really big thing for us. It's hugely important. So that just gives us a view of, you know, the things that we are doing and how much they do appreciate what we're doing for them. I attended the Humanists' 20th anniversary in Farnham. They're always a very interesting group of people. You know, we have a lot of religion in our lives. It's nice to talk to people who are focused on doing good, but do not have any particular religious beliefs. I've been to 2 or 3 civic services of other mayors, and I had one delightful time when I opened a library at St Mary's School in Chinningfold. I think I was last there for the Queen's Jubilee. They were so keen to have someone to open this in September that they actually sent their application in May. If only everybody else kept time so well, that would be wonderful. Right, that's the end of my announcements. Just a quick beg, please. Please try and be as brief as possible in all your speeches, everyone. And also, please try not to repeat yourselves or repeat what anyone else has said. I will gently remind you if it happens, but I'm sure your fellows sitting next to you will also remind you. So, Leader, do you wish to speak?
Yes, Mr Mayor, and I will be brief. Only 3 short updates. The first is to remind everybody that Surrey Pride takes place on Saturday. The last time Surrey Pride was held in Waverley, it was in Godalming, and it was a fantastic event which the whole community got involved in. It is an opportunity to show support to a significant sector of our community that I think in many cases is under threat in a lot of different ways. I, amongst others, will be in the parade on Saturday and hope to see you there. I just want to also thank some of the officers in the Planning Policy Department on behalf of Councillor Townsend. We have been taking quite a lot of time to properly engage with the aspects of the various aspects of the National Planning Policy Framework that are under consultation by the government. These are obviously incredibly important as they relate to things such as housing numbers and other deeply uncontroversial matters that might be part of the local plan going forward. So we've been putting a lot of energy into making sure that our responses are good and comprehensive. They certainly won't be the last, but I want to thank those officers who have put in a great deal of energy to making sure that those responses are good. And finally, just to say thank you on behalf of my 2 housing portfolio holders, Councillor Paul Rivers and Councillor Janet Crowe, to our housing officers who have delivered up at Oxford Ridge, which the executive and some representatives of Godalming Town Council went to last week. Oxford Ridge Site C, which, considering some of the debate we have this evening, fuel and energy efficient housing. This is EPC A-level housing, our new social units up there, some of the best housing in the country. It is how we deal with fuel poverty in a way that the government can't really regulate or take away from us. And the other thing I would just add there is that we also renovated 7 properties on Oxford Ridge, who on average are 93 years old. Now, I would challenge anybody to go up to Oxford Ridge and identify those 7 properties, because I think if you went into them, you would think that they were new, and that we have managed to achieve a rating change from EPC D to A in 93-year-old properties is something that I think we should be very, very proud of indeed. And I want to thank Louisa Blundell and her team for everything they have done to make that happen, and long may it continue. Thank you very much, Mr Mayor, and I'll hand back to you.
Thank you very much. Head of Paid Services, do you wish to make any comments? No. Chief Finance Officer, do you wish to make any comments?
Just one thing to mention, Mr Mayor, if that's okay. Just to let the council know that Mavis Amuzu Aku has now left us as the Deputy 151 Officer, and Candice Keat has taken over that role. So you'll know.
Thank you very much. Monitoring Officer, do you wish to make any points? Thank you very much. Then we will move on to item 5, which is questions from members of the public. And unless anything has escaped my notice, there are none. Is that correct? Thank you. Questions from members of the council. I understand there is a question from Councillor Beeman that has appeared in the addendum to your agenda. Both question and answer are printed there, and under our current constitution, they are taken as read at this meeting. But Councillor Beeman, you are entitled to ask a supplementary question if you so wish. Councillor Beeman.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. The only thing I would say is I certainly hope there'll be more sort of attention paid to flooding issues. There is the Abbey View development, which has prepared the 66-page comprehensive report on the flooding issues caused there, and I think there's a problem in Badshot Lee. So I'm certainly hoping that the words printed are going to be acted on.
Thank you, Councillor. Leader, do you or any of the executive wish to reply or comment?
And merely that obviously we're going to make sure that we take those words very, very seriously. In most cases, flooding has increased in large parts of the borough. I mean, I would highlight, for example, the Cashel flood defences that were put in there to be guardians against 80-year floods, and I believe have been deployed or threatened to be deployed at least 5 times since I became a councillor in 2017. So these things are clearly more serious, more frequently, and we have to treat them as such. Thank you.
Thank you, Leader. We now move on to the main items for debate. Item 7 is our fees and chargings policy. We have a report before us to consider, and I understand, Councillor Merriweather, you wish to move the recommendation, but not at this moment speak to it.
That's correct, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Do you have a seconder?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, pleased to second.
Thank you very much. Seconder, do you wish to speak immediately after the mover of the resolution, or do you wish to withhold your fire to later in the debate?
As ever, happy to reserve comment.
Thank you very much. Councillor Merriweather, then you may speak to your motion.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That just took longer than I think I'm going to take on actually proposing it. So I just want to refer members to pages 19 to 36 of your pack, and to start with, draw your attention to a gremlin that slipped through in paragraph 8.1 of the covering report under consultations, and just to confirm that this report doesn't need to be taken via the Audit and Risk Committee, should it be approved by Council this evening. Otherwise, hopefully the policy itself on pages 25 to 36 of the pack and the covering report are self-explanatory and demonstrate our commitment to continuous improvement. Fees and charges for so-called discretionary services are an important source of income for us. But like everything else we do, even they are heavily regulated. While we are confident that we follow good, if not best practice, when it comes to setting these fees and charges, it is better still that we capture this in an appropriate, consistent and transparent policy. So the proposed policy itself doesn't in any way signpost or bind us to any future rate changes. These will still be reviewed and set annually as part of our budget setting process. Rather, the policy just captures which fees and charges, when and how discretionary services rates will be reviewed as part of that annual process. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Merriweather. Does anyone wish to speak to this amendment? Councillor Goodrich.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm satisfied that this new policy makes sense, subject to certain assurances. I'm looking through the policy, it seems to follow what we have been doing in practice over the years, because there are lots of exceptions, lots of occasions when one exercise discretion not to charge the full recovery cost and so on and so forth. But could it be clarified that this is largely, if not totally, a codification of what we've done in practice in the past? It appears to be the case, and I appreciate that to have a policy which is open and transparent is helpful. But are there any changes as to what we have done in the past that is being brought forward for the future? We've always, for example, tried to ensure that fees and charges where we could reflects the cost to this council. It's not a change, but I would like to know if there's any changes. And is it likely that the result of this policy is going to result in a large increase in some of our fees and charges in the next year, for example? Because I just don't want there to be a sort of claim, well, you approved the policy and that's why this charge is being doubled, and so on and so forth. So I would like that assurance. I note that the gremlins got into the report. And in fact, I thought that actually Audit and Risk Committee looking at it would have been a very sensible scrutiny of this document, because clearly some scrutiny needs to take place. I mean, I have found for a starter that there's a mistake in it, and would draw people's attention to paragraph 9.4, where reference is made to the cabinet. I didn't think we had one, so perhaps that could be sorted out. I suspect that this is a policy that Guildford also have, and it may be that Guildford went to Audit and Risk to look through their version, and I wonder why we haven't done the same. Certainly, I am concerned at the standard of some of our agenda papers, because I was going to ask the question, what's the point of approving a policy and then consulting on it afterwards? But I am concerned, and I would like to have the reassurances before I vote in favour of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I'm sure the mover or the seconder will pick that up during their speech. Is there anybody else who wishes to comment? Sorry. Councillor Hyman, then Councillor Austin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I did actually share the same concerns with Councillor Goodrich, and I wanted to go slightly further and ask for examples of the greatest impact that there would be. If you could give us any examples of where you see, you know, what impact this would have, because obviously it is good to have a policy, and it looks fairly straightforward. And I did want to know what's the present type of system, because I thought, as Councillor Goodrich does, obviously that it's very similar to what we've been doing. It's nice to have it set out. At the top of page 28, it says that the recipient of the discretionary service must have agreed to provision and agreed to pay for it. That assuages most of my concerns, if it's true, that that means that there won't be any, for instance, imposing new services and charges upon residents and tenants without them first agreeing to it. Presumably in writing, but if you could also explain to me the difference between making generally available to people and imposing, because if making generally available means that people don't have to give their consent first of all, then that doesn't seem to abide by the principle at the top of page 28 that I've just quoted at 4.3. So there's also a set of rules at paragraph 6.6 on page 31, which in which individual executive members can override and grant concessions. There is obviously have to be some sort of concern that there may be inconsistency or perception of unfairness if in the way that is wielded if we're not careful, or even done for political advantage, heaven forbid. And so obviously what we want to make sure is that that it's fairly clear as to the circumstances in which that can be done, and whether and the checks and balances that there might be, because if individual members can just let people off, you know, everybody's going to want to be let off of different fees and charges. But, you know, how far does this go, I suppose, is the question. What's the examples? Most important thing, can you give us examples of the greatest impact this will have in supporting Councillor Goodrich's question regarding how is it going to affect us? What effect will it have? Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Austin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First of all, just for us new councillors, I wanted to comment, it would have been useful to actually append the current Waverley fees to this report, because then we would get some idea of practically what this relates to. So I went to Candice, and I understand now we're talking about 25% of our income into the council in this, which is dealt with by this policy. And so it's not an insignificant thing. The policy itself is general, seems a bit vague in areas. Again, just echoing concerns of Councillor Goodrich, has this been just lifted from Guildford and not checked in a couple of areas. I was interested, though, to go to look at the fees and see what this does cover. So it's parking, as well as green bin collection, room hire, burial fees, getting married. If you want to rename a road in Waverley, it's currently £372. If you want to hold a car boot sale, £193.70. If you would like to have a balloon launch, it's £99.80. Well, goodness knows how this policy will be able to cover all of these far-ranging things, but in principle, I'm happy with it on the basis that it should provide greater transparency for the end user about how our charges are derived. And the important bit, of course, is that full council will have sign-off in the budget process. I look forward to hearing the answer to Councillor Goodrich and Councillor Hyman's questions.
Thank you, Councillor. Any more councillors wish to speak to this motion? Seconder, do you wish to exercise your right?
In this case, I'll defer to the portfolio holder.
In that case, would you like, as proposer of the motion, to sum up, please, Councillor Merriweather?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As Councillor Austin very helpfully pointed out, this policy does not change any of the fees and charges. It simply sets out a framework and a process to be followed by us when we consider the fees and charges that we are levying on, to come to Councillor Hyman's point, discretionary services. These are the things that we are not required to provide, and those services that our residents are not obliged to take up should they not wish to do so. Those tables of our fees and charges, discretionary fees, our charges, are published. They're published every year with our budget papers. Anybody can go online and look at our February budget papers. I do believe they were also covered quite extensively in councillor training. And so they are there for our residents to see. And they are subject to reaffirmation every year during our budget cycle. So the question of whether there's going to be any financial impact as a result of this policy is that by definition there isn't. All this does is set out for us principles, policies, procedures that we already follow every year in resetting and reaffirming the charges that we make, fees and charges that we make for our discretionary services. And Councillor Austin's quite right to list some of them out, like car parking and others. These are very important sources of income for us that we use to provide the services that our residents elect us to provide and re-elected us to provide last year. Things that we couldn't afford to do otherwise because of the punitive and unreliable financial framework that we live in through central government. So I think that's it. I'd just encourage members to reread, if they need to, the scope paragraph that covers what this does and does not cover, and to apologise to members for the obvious other gremlin that got through in paragraph 9.4. I think that pretty much covers it. Otherwise, I'm going to start repeating what I said when I proposed this in the first place. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor.
Mr. Mayor, could I have an answer to my questions, please?
I'm very happy to repeat what I've said.
If you're repeating it, don't bother. If you're going to just say something different, then fine.
Very good. Okay, I'm not going to.
Okay. Then we will move to the vote, which will be electronic. And the recommendation before you is that Council approves and adopts the fees and charges policy set out in the appendix to this report. And I believe your lights are flashing, so please vote accordingly.
I believe there's one more person to vote. Yeah.
Okay. We'll remove that card. We'll remove that card.
Thank you, Chair. So we have 33 in favour and 6 abstentions, none against. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kim. Therefore, that motion, that recommendation is carried. Right. We will now move on to item 8 on your agenda. Museum of Farnham Mend Project, budget approval. We have a report before us this evening to consider the Museum of Farnham Mend Project, and I understand this will be moved by Councillor Fairweather. Fairclough.
Mr. Mayor,
Tony's got it.
I think I should say thank you, Mr. Mayor. On behalf of Councillor Mirrlees, I'd like to move this motion, and I believe I have a seconder.
that I'm very happy to do. That's amazing.
Do you wish to speak immediately after the proposer of the motion, or do you wish to reserve your right?
I reserve.
Thank you very much. Councillor Fairclough, you may speak.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In the absence of Councillor Mirrlees, I'm pleased to bring this item to Council. It seeks Council approval to appoint a contractor for the conservation repair work to the Museum of Farnham. The chosen contractor, management and construction services, is being recommended following a detailed and exhaustive procurement exercise where heritage experts sat on the evaluation board to ensure that the quality of services was the primary consideration when appointing a contractor to work on such a beautiful and nationally recognised building as Wilmer House. The final price tendered for the works is £1,286,713.74. This includes contingency funding of £237,000. A total of £985,000 of external funding has been secured to date. And here I would like to thank the efforts of officers and indeed councillors for securing such a fantastic sum of money towards this project. As part of the tender exercise, it was felt prudent to price potential additional work. Due to the height of the building, we have been unable to thoroughly survey the upper elements of the building, and given the age of this Grade 1 listed building, it is possible that additional work will be identified when we erect the scaffolding and begin the repair works. Since there are both cost and time savings from carrying out any additional works at the same time as the known repair works, it is therefore sensible to have an agreed budget to do so. These potential additional works are listed in detail in section 12 of the paper and include such things as parapet gutter, welfare facilities, costs of which we hope to reduce, and window repairs, including additional work to the window at the rear of the building. As stated previously, with apologies, Mr. Mayor, the total cost for these potential additional works are £237,000. There are 3 recommendations before you and 3 reasons for these recommendations. The primary ones being a prudent provision for the potential contingencies and the aim of reducing the risk of extending the programme and thereby incurring additional project costs. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Does anybody wish to speak to this item? Councillor Austin.
Thank you. I would first like to say our council group is supportive of Farnham's heritage, and we recognise this building work must be completed. The renovated building will be excellent for Farnham. But I must point out our serious concerns about the reporting of this agenda item to councillors and the public, and our concerns about the original numbers presented to us. When this was brought to us in July 2023, the budget was 1.029 million. As we've discussed, the grant was on the table, and as a council we were asked to cover a budget gap of 275k in the event no other funding could be found. This therefore inferred that Waverley's financial input would be minimal. I quote Councillor Merrilees from the minutes. To accept the grant, it was necessary for the council to agree to meet this funding gap in case there was a shortfall in additional fundraising. Now, we move forward a year and we have a budget of 1.471 million. So that's a massive 43% increase in 12 months, not 20%, as reported in the local press. We all understand projects of this nature may be subject to unexpected costs, but nearly 500,000 of them. This means approved Waverley Budget Council's financial commitment will now be a huge £487,000, comprising the 275 budget gap money now fully committed and a further 212,000. On top of this, it is indeed fortuitous we have achieved support from the National Lottery Heritage Fund of 230k, a grant which originally would have offset some of the 275 Waverley committed. So I'm very disappointed about the confusing nature also of the report and the lack of transparency and openness here. For example, I note that what's described as contingency budget is actually mostly costed supplementary due to more extended special work. Nowhere in this report do we see the original budget number of 1.029 million, which came to council last July. There is no reference to the history of this item really in the papers or on Waverley's website in the agenda history section. I had to go hunting around for the dates and the data. The project has been through a competitive procurement process, and so I'm satisfied the current costs are correct, but the report brought to us 12 months ago was way off. We should have been given a properly costed budget in 2023. Look, for example, 12.4. How did we forget to put £140,000 of known costs for window repair when it was brought to council? It seems a foolish thing to omit that, given Waverley were aware of the window cost because they had to exclude it from the MEND grant. What has happened here? 12.2, the original timing estimate was also completely wrong. The build period has increased from 52 to 70 weeks. In order to avoid further escalation of costs, we have little choice but to press forward. And I hope that we can make some savings in areas and some further funding can be sourced. Someone I know has suggested we should all buy a brick. Having said that, I will be voting for this. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Coburn, followed by Councillor Follows.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd quite happily buy a brick. We have been discussing this building for years, long before we've got this final scenario, if you like. And I can remember being in the town council chamber, and we came out with all sorts of unrealistic options about buying it for ourselves and mending it, and then we realised what the costs would be. In fact, we slightly overestimated them, and I hope that we don't end up going up to what we were looking at, which was nearer the 2 million than the 1.5. I think we have to do what is proposed here. I don't think we have any choice, and I think it's the right thing for Farnham. I have to say, I don't think we've always been generous enough in our support, in our gratitude to those people who supported us along the way. I mean, the Farnham Town Clerk was superb in his support for all this funding. It doesn't just happen. I mean, congratulations to the officers and the executive as well, but some gratitude should go to all the other people in Farnham who actually supported these bids, because you don't get these bids if you don't have community support, and it was certainly there. Everyone who's walked under that wretched scaffolding for the last goodness knows how many years will be so delighted to see it go and to see that wonderful building restored. At one point, we thought we would have perhaps sell it for residential. We just couldn't see how we were ever going to achieve what we are, we hope, about to achieve now. So yes, I regret the overspend, but we've got to get this done. I regret the slightly longer time because we've waited long enough, and it would be great to have this thing up and running. But it is a superb building. It's in a line of superb buildings, and I hope when it's finished that it really adds much to that street scene, because it is one of our lovely line, if you like. We've got many of them, as you know, in Farnham. We have so many listed buildings. I think we beat Chester. But, you know, we really do want to see that line of buildings without that wretched scaffolding. So I'm 100% behind this and look forward to seeing it started. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Follows, followed by Councillor Hyman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was about to launch into a thing, but actually Councillor Coburn's response, I think, is much more generous and realistic to how this site's been over the last few years. Just going back a few years, though, in 2019, we inherited this large, potentially problematic site that Waverley owned, but obviously had a material interest in Farnham, and particularly the community in Farnham and the town council, with absolutely no viable plan to do anything about it whatsoever. Now, it's not fortuitous that we've achieved all of these grants. It's because our officers have worked incredibly hard to get them. Now, obviously, we work in this slightly odd system where we have to get grants for everything because obviously things aren't centrally funded properly. But where we have done really well here is achieve these very significant grants from lots of different organisations to make this work. Now, for anybody who's not been too au fait with the detail of this, this is a very, very complicated project. It requires very, very specific heritage requirements that we have to meet, down to things like the bricks have to be cured at a particular time of year to be correct. We've had people go up and deal with all of the different the sort of fascias of the bricks to make sure that what we put there matches what was there before. It's an incredibly involved process that's had to go through quite a lot over the last few years. Now, this item's history is extensive. And I'm just going to finish here before I hand over to somebody else, that this is one of about 4 things I was told by the last Conservative portfolio holder who held this role, that it would be absolutely impossible to fix. Now, this is the last one of those things I was told that was impossible that we've had to deal with. And I'm very pleased to see that the impossible has become possible now. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Hyman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I think Councillor Austin made some good points there, actually, in respect of perhaps the way it's reported. But we did know it was a difficult project, and I'm very pleased actually that most of it is that Waverley are looking at paying is contingency as it stands, and therefore, hopefully we'll be able to stick well within budget. That's a big fingers crossed, of course. I'm of an age where spending £1.5 million on buying a building was unimaginable as a library, let alone for spending it on the refurbishment of one. But however, after seeing £4 million spent on improving the Memorial Hall, knowing how special Wilmer House is architecturally, it really is a very special and rare architecturally. We are very lucky to be able to save and preserve it. And frankly, I wouldn't mind if it actually costs us a bit more, because we spend a lot of money on other things and we don't get the benefit long term. This is something, I know it's in Farnham and it's difficult for other towns to appreciate it perhaps, and the money going on it, but it is a very wise way to spend some of our council taxpayers' money. And we have to thank the people who put so much effort in over the past 6 or 8 years. There's a lot of people, and a few have put in a tremendous amount of effort. We know who they are, and we have to thank them very much. But just a word of warning, paragraph 12.9 on page 48, my heart leapt. Additional period of traffic light hire, approximate cost £15,000. West Street, traffic lights coinciding with the Farnham infrastructure project. We do not live in a perfect world.
Thank you, Councillor Hyman, for that interesting musing. Councillor Ian Waker?
Yes, I suppose people are aware that the bricks that are used on the rebuild are very, very expensive. So I would endorse the recommendation of Councillor Austin of buy a brick, as the council thought of a scheme like that to fund these very expensive bricks. Thank you.
Thank you. Does the seconder wish to... Sorry, Gemma, Councillor, were you waving? No, okay. Does the seconder wish to speak?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, just to pull some of those thoughts together, really. Yes, not only is this a Grade 1 listed building, but we are a local authority. So procurement has to meet a whole load of challenges here for not just inflation, which we're all very familiar with, but the uncertainty in the building, the works that were needed to the timber work on top of the brickworks, but to the supply of the skilled labour and the specialist materials in the marketplace to actually get hold of the stuff that we need to repair this building at any price. So there's a part of me that thinks that it's a small miracle that we've actually managed, after everything we've been through over the last few years, to come up with a plan to finish this work and pay for it within our means. There are a couple of other things I think I need to say. The first is that I regret the fact that we have to spend money on this building. What I regret more are the funding constraints that have been put on councils over the last 14, 15 years that forced the council to ignore the spend that was needed to maintain the building properly in the first place. Without those, we wouldn't even be here. Like the fees and charges matter, this is something that ONS have had every opportunity to review and comment on, and anything that they have officially said has been reflected in this report, which isn't a great deal. But at the end of it all, I would like to actually pick out one other specific name to add to Councillor Coburn's, and that is Farnham Maltings, whose expertise here in getting us to the point where we are has been absolutely priceless. And for those of us who have studied the report and seen the entire section dedicated to other funding sources, not just buy a brick, they will know that we are working very, very hard to make sure that this council's spend on what is currently the balance of the budget that has not currently been covered by funds will be covered one way or the other to make sure that that we put in as little as we possibly can of Waverley's money. This is a Farnham building, but it's to Waverley's credit, and it is to the nation's pride that we'll restore it. Thank you.
Thank you, councillor. Would the mover of the motion like to sum up, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As I think all speakers have identified, this is an incredibly complex project that requires unbelievable amounts of specialist expertise to deliver it. We have been extremely fortunate, but then again, we've been the creators of our own fortune in terms of securing a significant amount of funding, external funding for the project. And as Councillor Merriweather has just pointed out, we are going to be continuing to look for other sources of funding that will hopefully mean that Waverley are not going to spend too much of this. What I must remind people is a provisional amount for potential work. As Councillor Hyman and Councillor Coburn have pointed out, this is a fantastic asset for Farnham, but actually I do, if I may, disagree slightly with Councillor Merriweather. It is a fantastic asset for Waverley, for the whole of Waverley. It is a terrific building, and I'm very grateful for the support of members in approving this budget process. Thank you.
Thank you, councillor. The recommendation before you, councillors, is in three parts. I propose that we take them all together. For the sake of memory and the broadcast, I will read them to you. An increase of £230,310 to the capital budget, which is the amount awarded to the council by the National Heritage Lottery Fund, to increase the capital budget by a further £213,000 from Capital Contingency Reserve 3, and finally to approve an overall project budget of £1,471,713. These figures include a sum of £237,000, which represents the contingency budget and a provisional sum. As soon as your lights get up, councillors, could you please vote?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That's 39 in favour, no abstentions and none against.
Thank you very much, councillors. That then is carried unanimously. So let us now move forward to item 9, proposed Waverley Borough Council voluntary council tax initiative. We have before us this evening to consider this proposal, and I gather the leader is going to move the recommendation.
Yes, pleased to move the recommendation, Mr. Mayor, and I believe I have a seconder.
Happy to second, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much. As seconder, do you wish to speak immediately after the proposer, or do you wish to withhold your fire for later?
I'll withhold my fire, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Leader, you may propose the motion.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, members. There have been quite a few things over the last few years where I've begun with a sentence similar to, I really shouldn't have to propose a recommendation like this. But to borrow the Mayor's opening words, how do we best serve those who put us here? For me, that's exploring every single opportunity within our relatively limited powers to help people. And on this one, I can say that it might not have been our idea, but I'm very happy to borrow or outright steal someone else's good idea when it is a good idea, and this one is. So let's cut to the chase. There should be more council tax bans than we have now. Now, I must have repeated this ridiculous refrain about 4,000 times during the general election, but somebody in a £150,000 Band B flat should not be paying only a little less council tax than somebody in a £20 million Band H house. Extreme examples, perhaps, but ones that exist in this borough. But national government set these rules, and both Labour and the Conservatives ruled out in the general election doing anything about banding, or indeed the core valuation issues that lay at the centre of the banding problem overall. And these are also something that the principal opposition is refusing to tackle going forward as well. So it means that we have to do something a little bit different. The idea tonight is not new. Several councils have done it. They've been undertaken by various different types of councils, by various political parties at those councils, and in various different levels of control at those councils. This stage is to go out to consultation with our substantial Band H community of over 2,000 properties about sort of things they would like to see any money collected be used on. This process, like all of this, has been pretty much taken lock stock from the experiences of other councils, including the council, of course, that our current Joint Chief Executive used to work at. And I want to take this opportunity to thank that council, Westminster Council, for their support and making sure that we haven't at every stage here had to reinvent the wheel. Now, ultimately, we have very, very few opportunities to bring in money to aid communities we represent. This is a low cost, low risk and potentially high gain opportunity. And I believe that we do have that duty to explore every avenue. And just to give a little bit of an example here, our entire Thriving Communities budget is what, a little over 75k, pushing 100,000. How much would we really need from only a handful of Band H residents to be able to do another half of that again, or double it, or triple it? It really wouldn't be that much. And you think doubling the amount right now that we give to our local communities for the things that are most important, that for me, bearing in mind 75k extra would be an actually relatively unsuccessful version of this scheme, even that is worth the attempt. Now, there will be some costs, of course. There is basic officer time. We'll be establishing a governance process that will mean we'll be subject to things like audit from the Charities Committee. We'll have to make sure that the rules are set up. But of course, this council does already run some charitable bodies and trusts. We have experience as a council in the Officer Corps and as members in handling these sorts of affairs. So, as council previously agreed to the last budget to explore this item more fully, this is what we're doing now. The next stages are to go out to consultation with the residents that it might impact before we then come back to council with that full governance, the more fleshed out model, and making sure that we really do take every opportunity to get money to help our residents. And I think I will just clarify one final time, because it's often misrepresented. This is a wholly voluntary scheme, wholly voluntary for those in Band H. But I'll be absolutely upfront with you. I really wish it wasn't. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Does anybody wish to speak to this item? Councillor Austin, then Councillor Hyman.
Thank you. I don't think any of us would argue with the principle of supporting local causes, but our concern is that this is distracting Waverley from the key issues they should be dealing with. This idea is from Conservative-led Westminster Borough Council, as we've stated, who in 2017 invited Band H council taxpayers to make this voluntary contribution. The fund has raised 300k per annum approximately to date, and following consultation, they're focusing on young people and homelessness. Well, that's great. But it would be wrong of us not to point out our reservations of this scheme for Waverley. First, we are not Westminster Council. Last year, Westminster's net council tax income was 69 million, and Waverley's was only 16.8% of that at 11.6 million. If you apply this proportionality, this means the Waverley scheme would potentially raise around 50k per annum. We've got 2,134 Band D equivalent of Band H taxpayers. So that equates to only 3.87% of households. These households already, for information, pay 6.7% of council tax by income. So it's a shame these very basic numbers are not provided in this report for you to give members an idea of the numbers we're dealing with. So, costs. Is this worthwhile? There are, of course, costs in setting up this scheme. It's a shame we haven't seen any of these estimated costs for legal, financial setup, administration, setup for the governance, officer and manager time, future and already expended on an hourly rate basis. Mailing each household of those 2,134 homes, second class, twice a year, as the report states, will cost best part of £4,000 or £6,000 if you want to do it first class. The report talks about setting up and administering a web page, further cost, bank fees, more costs. So I think it's quite right that the key risks identified here are that these 3.87% of Band H residents choose to continue to donate to charities of their choosing and do not take up this scheme. We have an incredibly generous group of residents, but they're also savvy. Waverley Borough Council need to be able to demonstrate that placing their money in the trust of this charity would be as or more worthwhile than the existing donation methods that they use. As such, it is imperative that any such scheme should be able to claim gift aid. But in all the time the executive are addressing attention to items like this, our council is not focusing efforts on delivering core services well, focusing on cost control and avoiding those vanity projects. Last year, our total cost of staff bill was up by millions to 23.4 million. 3.7 million of that was agency and temporary staff. We're spending millions on these vanity projects like 69 High Street. And that's just on the retail bit. For 5 years, Broadwater Park has been left to rot. Those are the concerns I want the council to be completely focused on, not, I'm afraid, sideshows like this. Having said that, I will be voting for it. It'll be an interesting experiment.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Hyman, followed by Councillor Coburn.
Well, thank you, Councillor Austin, because you've covered just about everything that I went through myself, so that's great. We aren't City of Westminster, COW. I don't know how they managed to get COWAT or whatever it is, because if I think of City of Westminster, People's Arms Length Trust, then that's different. Anyway, whatever this is, we are not City of Westminster. They don't have much of a homelessness problem there because we don't have a homelessness problem in Waverley. They obviously have quite an interest in the City of Westminster to make sure that they don't have a problem. Down here, we've got 700 homeless in tin huts at Dunsfold, I understand, and we don't have them on the streets of our towns, and so we've got a problem that's brewing. But I can't see that people are going to be willing to put the same money in because I don't know what our people who are giving money to charity at the moment are going to want to put the money in the way that the people in the City of Westminster put their money in, and we just don't have the income down here and the numbers of them. So it doesn't add up to me to cover the costs, which is essentially what's been said. But that said, we can ask the people and see what they say. This is only going to consultation. We can ask the Band H people, but we must listen to what they say. And if it looks like it that we're not going to cover costs, because I'm going to assume that our officers are going to want paying if they're going to evening meetings and that sort of thing. If everybody's doing this for nothing, then absolutely great, let's do it. But I can't imagine that within the system we've got, everybody's going to be doing everything for nothing without time in lieu or whatever it happens to be. So, provided, yep, it's a charity and everything is extra and it's going to good causes, every one of us will support it, I'm absolutely sure. But I'm not quite certain that it's going to bring in any money, and I'm not quite certain that that's quite what we've got in front of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Coburn, followed by Councillor Keele.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I too am afraid I'm underwhelmed by this suggestion. For many of the reasons that people have already mentioned, I will be supporting it because it's voluntary. I certainly wouldn't if it ever made compulsory. But I just speak from experience. For 35 years, I've been fundraising. I've fundraised for small things with a few thousand, a kitchen and a charity shop or something. bigger thousands for a minibus or something like that, up to 3 million for the Woodlarks campsite, and obviously over and beyond that for the Royal Surrey and the Phyllis Tuckwell Hospice. I don't mean I do individually do this, but I work with other people to raise funds and hold fundraisers. And the philanthropy and the generosity of people in all bands of housing in this borough completely surprises me. Or every time I'm amazed. We start off looking at millions of pounds and I think, oh, gosh, we're never going to raise this. And we do every single time because people are basically philanthropic. But as a Conservative, my instinct is not to tax them, but these people, but to be the small state, let them have all the disposable income. And as Councillor Austin said, let them decide what they want to spend it on. Now, I know this is voluntary and you can tell me that over and over again. But I'm like Councillor Hyman. I doubt it's going to bring in a lot of money. What have Westminster got? 17,050 Band H. The sums don't really add up. But, I should hate to think that people in this borough think that people sitting in Band H's actually need any push to be generous, because they certainly don't. But it doesn't just apply to Band H, as I say. And when you've got people who are really without money, they put in time and resources for fundraising. This borough is incredible. Mr. Mayor will certainly back me up on this, because every mayor that's ever been round is always astonished at the end of a mayoral year to see just how generous people are with their disposable income. So, yeah, I'm underwhelmed. I'm certainly not going to vote against it. I don't think it'll raise a great deal of money. I do think it's a diversionary sort of tactic. All I see in the council chamber, I'm sorry, is staffing issues, problems in planning. And don't tell me they're national, because I know they are. But, I still think that's what we should be concentrating on, getting our core costs down, not messing around with something like this. But at the same time, I would support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I have 3 members of the executive wishing to speak. If anyone else wishes to speak, I will happily intersperse them so we are not constantly executized. Councillor Goodrich, okay. Councillor Keele, then I'll put in Councillor Goodrich.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. There's a rather disappointing lack of ambition in some of the comments we've heard so far. I would argue at a time when local authorities are facing funding challenges, are having to make tough decisions, this is a low-risk, innovative proposal with a high potential gain. Why would we not give it a go? If we don't ask, we will never know. Even if it brings in less than Westminster, this could potentially increase the amount we're able to spend on community services across Waverley to support our residents, and I think is a very exciting area to explore. And I look forward to seeing the outcome of the consultation with our Band H householders. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Goodrich, followed by Councillor Fairclough.
Mr. Mayor, I don't propose to repeat what Councillor Austin, for example, has said, but I am concerned about the cost. I will support it, but I am concerned about what our costs will be. Could I ask the proposer, and I'll see if he answers it this time on questions I ask, but he must have some idea of the costs of setting up the trust, getting it all organised and so on, a basic setup cost before we start. There must be some idea of that, whether it be 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, or whatever it is. I know it'll come back after the consultation, but I would have thought someone must have some idea of what it's going to cost this council in non-returnable expenses to set this up. I hope that people will support it. But as Councillor Coburn has said, a lot of people in Band H support charities in the ways that they want to support, rather than council-led initiatives to support. So I have my concerns, and I don't want to put a dampener on it, but please could we be told roughly what this is going to cost to set up?
Thank you, councillor. I have councillor Fairclough, followed by councillor Beeman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We have around 2,000 Band H properties in Waverley. If just 10% of those sign up and agree to donate £25 per month, that gives us £62,500 for social projects in the borough. The leader made reference to our Thriving Communities Fund being broadly similar to that. That is a significant sum of money by any measure. And here, the projects that it will be spent on as part of the consultation, the projects will be chosen or potentially chosen by those very Band H residents. I actually think that those figures I've just quoted, 10% sign up, £25 per month, they're pretty realistic, actually. In fact, given that my understanding is that the scheme is tax efficient, my assumed figures may in fact be too low. And if they are, I'll be more than happy to be proved wrong, just as I am more than happy to support this recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, councillor. I have councillor Beeman, followed by councillor Williams.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. A simple question, I think. Why is it just restricted to Band H council taxpayers? What if somebody from other council tax bands wants to contribute? Are they going to be turned away?
Right, thank you. Councillor Williams, followed by councillor Davidson.
I think in response to councillor Beeman's comment, the reason why it's Council H, Band H, council taxpayers that are being asked to contribute here is because there is no Band I, there is no Band J, there is no Band K, there is no Band L, etc. Council tax is essentially not a very progressive form of taxations. And as far as property values are a proxy for wealth, council tax is not progressive. A household living in a Band A property would on average pay something like 0.5% of that property's value in council tax compared to a household in a Band H property, which would typically pay just over 0.1%. So because there is no Band I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P, Q, R, S, T, U, V, W, X, Y, Z, should not those who can well afford it have an opportunity to make a small additional contribution to their local community? I'm puzzled by Councillor Austin's comments that she considers this to be a vanity project. There is significant need in this borough, and there is a significant number of residents who have the capacity to be able to help to meet this need. And suggesting that this will not bring in any money, which appears to be a major criticism, in my view, is an indictment of what Councillor Coburn referred to as the good nature.
Stop you for a minute, councillor. I think Councillor Austin has a point of information.
Sorry, yep.
Thank you. Point of personal explanation. Councillor Williams has misrepresented what I said. What I said was that this was a sideshow. I did not say that this was a vanity project. Thank you.
Carry on, Councillor Williams.
I think they were the words that were used.
Let's not argue about that.
Let's move on from that. The suggestion that it would not bring any money seems to be a major criticism, but I do see that as an indictment of what Councillor Coburn talked about, the good nature, kindness, philanthropy of the most affluent of our community in Waverley. So in a sense, what we are suggesting here is something which actually addresses some of those imperfections and unfairnesses in our system of local government finance. And as has been made absolutely clear, the proposal does not actually force Band H council taxpayers to do anything. It simply gives them an opportunity to make a big contribution to their local community. And I hope this initiative will be welcomed by residents, and I hope that in time our community in Waverley will benefit significantly from it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I have Councillor Davidson, followed by Councillor Gale.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Like many of the members in this room, we are, or I have been, and I'm sure most of you have also been, involved on the committees of various organizations in your community, many of which will be charitable ones. As indeed have I, and been the treasurer for one of those charities, arriving in the committee just at the tail end of it being set up. It is not a big job to set up a charity. It's relatively small work. It may be that's because these were small charities, but they're not necessarily that difficult to do. And running them subsequently, again, has not been that difficult in terms of time consumption. But I have a question and ask for an assurance from the executive that when we get the response back from the survey of our Band H taxpayers, that when we set up this trust, assuming that it's still got the go-ahead, that we have a constitution which is defined to ensure that the funds or the charity is the money for it is ring-fenced and is no way part of any general fund objective. And I would like to see, and I'd welcome your assurance that when the Constitution and the governance model for it is finalised, it is brought to this council for debate and approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I have Councillor Gale.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a couple of questions, really. Councillor Fairclough gave an example that people would sign up for a monthly fee to be submitted to the charity. Is it only going to be where people sign up to give a monthly amount of money, or is it a one-off thing people can contribute to? And also, I agree with Councillor Beeman. I'm not sure why it's being restricted to just Band H, because we've got a lot of very wealthy people who live in bands D to G, and lots of people give to charity these days, and you might find people in lower bands would be willing to give. Thank you.
Thank you. I see no more hands. Does the seconder wish to speak?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Listen, very briefly, as a charity trustee, I think it's I know charities that run on fumes. They don't have a great deal of money, but they have motivated, philanthropic trustees who do a lot of work, who are not put off by the small costs of running a charity. In a way, it's quite reassuring that our critics think that the consultation that we're actually supposed to be discussing is going to go down so well that we will want to set up the trust and press the button and go ahead. It's a bit premature to be talking about some details at this stage. Anyone in this room who's been involved with a charity as a trustee, I'm sure is not only familiar with, as they are supposed to be, with the rights and responsibilities of a trustee, but also what a charity is supposed to look like, how it's supposed to conduct itself, report and regulate itself. As Councillor Coburn said, we do face national issues. We face national issues with planning. We face national issues with staffing. And we face national issues with funding. This is one of many initiatives that I think that we should be pursuing to deal with those. We can multitask. And to pick up on the two specific examples that Councillor Austin chose to make, 69 High Street is primarily a social housing project on a site that will be delivering much needed council housing for our residents that will pay for themselves, together with a leisure facility that will not only pay for itself, but will also generate funds to help us pay for the services that deliver. Broadwater has been delayed while we consult with our residents on what to do with it. That's the way we work. We have patience, but we do it at an appropriate speed, bearing in mind that we march to a very different beat than the private sector. Thank you.
Would the proposer like to sum up?
Yeah, I'll just cover a few of the points that were made. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So, Councillor Hyman, I actually recollect and have checked the stats that the homeless population in Westminster is one of the largest in the UK, and that's why their charity actually really did focus on that. And it might be that when we go out to consultation here, there might be other things that our Band H residents particularly care about. I'm going to take a punt right now that antisocial behaviour and youth services are going to be right up there. And that's something that obviously aligns not only with our current corporate strategy, but with the emerging draft as well. Critical issue is that we don't have enough money to do everything we want to do. And part of this process here, indeed the bit, as Councillor Merriweather made clear, the bit we're actually talking about here in terms of recommendations is consulting with those who might donate to see what they might do. And I just stress that again, because Councillor Coburn mentioned it. The fact that this is voluntary specifically is the exact opposite of a tax. I mean, if tax were voluntary, God knows where we'd be in this country, frankly. But let's talk about some of the other issues that were raised. Other bans. So what I asked this question is one of the very first questions I asked, do any of these other places look at other bands? So there's a couple of bits to this. Firstly, Band H being the last band has effectively it might not be infinite, but a very substantial ceiling. There's no ceiling. It could be anything from the lowest that it is up to millions and millions of pounds for a property. I asked about Band G. Now, obviously, there is a ceiling for Band G, and for all of the others, there's a maximum level. When you look at what the other councils who have done this sort of process have looked at, the evidence shows that the uptake is actually very, very poor for Band G. What a lot of these places have done is that once they've got Band H kind of embedded in, they then look at consulting with other bands. And I think in time, that's exactly what we'll do as well. But looking at the evidence from the other authorities that have done this, they start with H and then look at the other bands afterwards. So very happy to agree that that's probably what we'll do as well, but it will be in the fullness of time. Just Councillor Gale's comment, a lot of these, you can do it monthly as a direct debit, you can do it as one-off, it's basically the preference of the person donating. There's a gift aid component. But just to talk about the question that is not on the agenda but has been raised the most is about costs. Now, one of the things we did in this report was attach the statement of accounts from Westminster's equivalent of this. And I'm hoping everybody who raised the issues about cost did have a look at that. And they also had a look at the structure of the charities and trusts that we already manage at Waverley, of which there are, I think, 3, the Ewart Bequest, the other one in Hazelmere, so 2 at the moment. The usual practice here is in all of these sorts of things managed by councils and I think just reflect on Councillor Davidson's point, the setup is relatively minimal once you've got it done. And then it's the basics of running a charitable organisation. Now, that is broadly factored into the time of the officers that we have. And if it is great enough that this expands beyond the point that we do need more administrative capacity in finance to do that, obviously we'll expand that proportionate to the level of the fund. But just to reflect on what Westminster are spending, you look at the expenditure in the income and expenditure table 1 in the 3rd appendix to the report. And bearing in mind this is the total cost, this is not me missing a bunch of zeros. Admin expenses and independent examination fee, £583. Admin expenses, bank charges, £1,692, not hundreds of thousands of pounds or 10 thousands of pounds, pounds. So when I say this is relatively low cost to explore and potentially very high gain, I'm really not kidding. So members, please keep in mind that the actual recommendation in front of you is about to move to the next stage of consultation. Apologies, Councillor Davison, I did miss one of your questions, which was to talk about the governance. Governance, of course, will come back here. A number of these stages are actually required by law. There will be several that I'm very happy to commit to the maximum amount of transparency with council, notwithstanding any legal requirements, because I think it's the right thing to do. And in terms of that, I would be very keen to ensure that the Standards Committee and also the Audit Committee are involved in that process. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, councillors. To remind you, the recommendation before you is in two parts. I will take them together.
My apologies, Mr. Mayor. May I call a recorded vote? I forgot to end with that.
Do you have the necessary support? Very well. We will have a recorded vote. The recommendation before you is in two parts. We will take them together in the recorded vote. Approve proceeding to consultation with all Band H council tax paying properties. I think we better do it to the owners rather than the properties, but there we are. In order to gauge support for the establishment of a Waverley Borough Council voluntary council tax initiative. And that the Joint Strategic Director of Finance be delegated authority to develop and propose the engagement and consultation process in consultation with the leader of the council and the portfolio holder for finance and assets. And if we could have a roll call, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillors, when I call your name, please state whether you wish to vote for, vote against, or to abstain. Councillor Austin. Councillor Barker-Lomax.
For.
Councillor Beeman.
For.
Councillor Busby.
For.
Councillor Cavaliere.
For.
Councillor Coburn.
For.
Councillor Crowe. Councillor Davidson.
For.
Councillor Denis. Councillor Deuce.
For.
Councillor Earwaker.
For.
Councillor Fairclough.
For.
Councillor Follows.
For.
Councillor Gale.
For.
Councillor Goodridge.
For.
Councillor Higgins.
For.
Councillor Hyman. Thank you.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Keane.
For.
Councillor Keel.
For.
Councillor Long.
For.
Councillor MacLeod.
For.
Councillor Merriweather. Councillor Morrison.
For.
Councillor Munro.
For.
Councillor Murray.
For. Oh, sorry, I've just come back from playing golf for a week.
Councillor Nicholson. Councillor Raleen. Councillor Paul Rivers.
For.
Councillor Penny Rivers.
For.
Councillor Rabini.
For.
Councillor Spence.
For.
Councillor Staunton.
Against.
Councillor Steiger. Councillor Sullivan.
For.
Councillor Philip Townsend. Mr. Mayor.
For.
Councillor White.
For.
Councillor Wicks.
For.
And Councillor Williams.
For.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. There are 38 votes for and 1 vote against.
That is therefore carried, councillors. We now move on to Article 9 in our agenda, which is motions. Sorry, 10, my apologies. Arithmetic was never very good. We have one motion that's been submitted from Councillor Austin. It is set out as agenda item 10. and it will be considered, it is considered convenient and conducive to the dispatch of business that it be dealt with at this meeting. Councillor Austin, would you please just move your motion and indicate whether you have a seconder?
I move this motion and I have a seconder.
Pleased to second, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Coburn, do you wish to speak immediately after the proposer, or do you wish to hold your fire?
Probably hold my fire, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Austin, you then have 6 minutes to propose your motion.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillors, I ask for your support on this motion so that we can be a voice for the thousands of our pensioners in Waverley who may have to choose between heating and eating this year. Sorry, did you have your hand up?
Councillor Monroe?
Just indicated I wanted to speak in due course.
That's terribly good of you to give me notice. Thank you. I will put you down.
Very keen, excellent. Labour's removal of the winter fuel payment from all but those in receipt of means-tested benefits will cause financial and health safeguarding concerns for many in our borough. Age UK states that 2 million pensioners who need this money to stay warm this winter will not receive it. Here in Waverley, that means 26,000 pensioners who will no longer receive this allowance. Last week, both of our MPs voted against the removal of the winter fuel payment. In Westminster, the removal was controversial even within Labour's own ranks. A huge 53 of their own MPs last week refused to vote on this. Some of you may think, rightly, that pensioners, many pensioners in our borough are financially well off and don't need this money. That's right. Many are in the fortunate position that they even choose to donate the allowance. But it's also true that we have thousands of pensioners who sit just above the cut-off for pension credit, and they will lose this much-needed allowance. Many of these pensioners are people who have worked hard, paid taxes all their lives, and therefore don't qualify for benefits. These people will be unjustly left in financial hardship. The removal of the allowance will impact especially those pensioners living in our rural communities and also those living in older and less energy efficient homes, many of which are not connected to the mains gas network. Pensioners living in rural Waverley often rely on more expensive off-grid heating sources. To provide an example, heating oil, the cost of which was 54p per litre in 2020, now in 2024 it's 66p per litre. We know that 1 in 5 excess winter deaths are directly attributable to cold homes and 1 in 10 excess deaths to fuel poverty. We know that excess winter deaths are a serious concern, with over 30,000 recorded in the UK each year and disproportionately affecting older populations. Public Health reports there is a 1.5% increase in excess winter deaths for every degree Celsius drop below 18 degrees. Adequate heating is critical. So please join me in requesting, as per the motion, that we resolve to bring forward a council-led awareness campaign to alert those eligible for pension credit to apply for it. We know across the UK 85,000 people are eligible for this pension credit, but currently don't claim it. Request the council leader writes to the Chancellor of the Exchequer, urging a review of the decision to means test the winter fuel payment, and ask the government to ensure that vulnerable pensioners, particularly those who do not claim pension credit, are protected from fuel poverty. Commit to signing the Save the Winter Fuel Payment for Struggling Pensioners petition being run by Age UK, and write to all members offering them the opportunity to sign the petition themselves. Thank you.
Councillor Monroe, I am aware that there is a very complex amendment about to be proposed. Would you still wish to speak first, or would you like to hold your fire until you've heard what is coming forth?
I would like to speak Mr. Mayor, and I wish to put in an amendment, and I think I'm in pole position to do that, so that's what I propose.
Go ahead.
And I have a seconder in Councillor Gale.
Happy to second.
I've got copies of it, not one for everybody, but shall I come up and give it to you, Mr. Mayor, or shall we meet halfway?
I'd like it up on the board so everybody can see it, if that can be done, please. Can I see it first, Councillor Munro, just in case? Councillor? David? Sorry. Sorry. Not in a form that.
They want it typed.
It's not on the right package, and I can take it on. Eh?
Type it, send me an email. Have you got in your computer?
I can.
If you email to Bendix.
Have to export it.
Ah.
It's not in the right format. Let's have a look.
Very well, Councillor Munro. As we thought, it is not offensive. I will get it distributed around council and we will debate your amendment before the rather complex one that is likely to follow. And Councillor Gale, do you wish to speak immediately after the proposer or do you wish to reserve your rights?
If I can just say Councillor Munro is trying to email it to Ben so that he might be able to put it up. Mayor.
Councillors, I intend to call an adjournment when the rather complex amendment ends up in front of you. But I think this one is perhaps simple enough that we could carry on and then adjourn later.
Mr. Mayor, I just point out that Councillor Austin didn't read the very end of hers, which was the last of the thing, over the page. She got to the end of the page, but didn't go over the page. So we're amending something we haven't actually finished or heard. And these aren't an amendment to the recommendation?
I believe it is printed in your papers, isn't it?
It's not actually an amendment to the recommendation as far as I can see, so I don't know why we're going to debate it.
Okay, I will read the amendment proposed by Councillor David Munro and seconded by Councillor Maxine Gale. Copies are coming around to you and we hope to be able to put it on the board. But electronics may undermine us. Under council notes, add another bullet point reading, however, the current payment scheme is very expensive and wasteful by being made available tax-free to all pensioners, many of whom cannot fairly be said to need it. And under council believes, add another bullet point, a better scheme would retain the winter fuel payments for those who really need it, while removing or reducing it for those more well-off pensioners who do not depend on it in the same way as their poorer fellows. Okay, so we will adjourn for a couple of minutes so people can have a quick comfort break or a quick think and discussion, and then we will move into discussing the amendment. So 2.5 minutes. Councillors, I'll call council to order again, and the floor is with Councillor Munro to propose his amendment.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, and sorry to have held up proceedings with the technology, but you've got it in front of you now. I really do agree with just about every single word that's in the motion proposed by Councillor Austin. This winter fuel payments business is going to be deeply damaging and hurtful to a large number of people. And I'm frankly astonished that a new government didn't see what they were letting themselves in for. But I really don't think it goes far enough. And frankly, as one person who's been in receipt of this winter fuel payment for, I think it's over a decade now, it is such a blunt instrument. It is so wasteful. And it is spending an inordinate amount of money on people who don't actually need it. I don't need the winter fuel payment. It's jolly nice to have it. And it goes straight into my current account and I spend it how I like. And good luck to me. But why should poorer people who are just above the pension credit line have to subsidise people who frankly can afford to do without it? So that's the purpose of my amendment. I know there is another amendment coming which is much more detailed, but I've decided to be as non-prescriptive as I possibly could, and just so that this council can make it quite clear to government where it stands in principle. So there we are. I would just like to add one more point. One of the better aspects of the winter fuel payment is that it's given rise to a great number of charities across the UK who actually voluntarily ask people who don't need the payment if they can actually pay their winter fuel credit directly over to a charity who can help poorer people with their fuel credits. And there's an excellent charity in Farnham, for instance, called Wenceslaus, which is run by Farnham Lions. And I know there are equivalent charities all over the place who does exactly. I have to say, I cannot bring myself to dispense with the whole of my winter fuel payment. I'm only human, but I do give half of it. And that source of income will now presumably vanish at a stroke. So there you are, Mr. Mayor. That's my amendment, and I know I've got a seconder for it.
Right, I have Councillor Follows, followed by Councillor Coburn.
That is assuming that the seconder's waived her right to speak. I don't know if she was asked.
I thought she did.
My apologies then, Mr. Mayor. So really brief from me. I actually agree with the sentiments being proposed in this amendment, but I am intending to propose an amendment that goes a little further, deals with some of the same issues. I also agree with the substantive motion, but I don't think it goes anywhere near far enough in addressing the issues on the ground, or indeed things that we can do in Waverley. The amendment I will be proposing once this debate has concluded does deal substantively with the issues raised by Councillor Munro and a number of others.
Councillor Coburn?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's really a question. I didn't think amendments could change the substantive motion. I mean, it was very clear from Councillor Austin's. This motion is in response to the removal of the winter fuel allowance. It's not it's happened now, and the people at risk are the people who actually are going to miss out, the ones just above the poverty level. If you put in what Councillor Munro said, you've actually gone right against the whole point of the original motion. And I don't see how that can possibly be an amendment. To me, that's a totally separate motion. Exactly. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If I can refer councillors to Council Procedure Rule 15.7, which deals with amendments to motions, it does provide that the wording of the motion may be amended, provided that the effect is not to negate the motion. So the substantive motion on the table has a resolution proposed at the end of it, and I don't believe this proposed amendment does negate the resolution that's being proposed.
Can I just come back? Because in Councillor Austin's motion, before, she mentions the whole point of this being a universal and not a costly exercise of means testing. She actually uses the phrase means tested, if I remember. And we're actually, in this amendment, taking that out and saying, yes, it all should be means tested, in which case we will not be saving those people who do not get pension credit, who are just above it, because they will not get it whether we means test or not. So the whole point, the thrust of Councillor Austin's motion, as far as I could see it, was to say, you know, we don't want this change now done as in this way, the way it's been done, because it's going to penalise so many poor pensioners in our borough. And I really feel that, you know, we're taking the argument completely down a different route here. Whether or not we should have a universal payment is a different matter. We've got one that's just been stopped, and there's no argument on it. It's gone through Parliament, and we have got plenty of pensioners who are going to suffer as a result. And I couldn't possibly support this amendment because I don't think it's the amendment, the motion that Councillor Austin was putting forward.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So the motion, the substantive motion that's been proposed is in 3 sections. Council notes, and it has some bullet points. Council believes, and it has some bullet points. And then the last section is what the council is being asked to resolve. There is no suggestion that that be amended, and therefore I don't see how the proposed amendment can negate the motion on the table, because it's not changing what the council is being asked to resolve at all. It's merely adding words to the earlier sections.
Okay, thank you. Are these points of order? Okay. You've definitely finished, haven't you, Councillor Munro?
Yes, indeed.
Okay, thank you.
I'm just merely saying I agree with the last speaker.
Okay, I have Councillor Hyman, followed by Councillor Goodrich, and then probably Councillor Austin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, looking at this sensibly, the amendment that's before us is an amendment to the background and not to the resolution that is proposed in the motion. So it's pointless debating it and wasting any time on it. I mean, I agree with the things that are being said, but it's still totally irrelevant because it's not actually changing the resolution. The motion is that the council resolves 2, and there are 4 bullet points there. There is no change being proposed to that. There is no amendment to the motion proposed. Therefore, why are we debating it? I like what, you know, that it could be said. Mr. Councillor Munro, you know, obviously is welcome to say the things that he's put into his proposal there, but it isn't an amendment to what's actually being resolved. So I can't understand why we shouldn't move on. And if Councillor Follows has got something, I don't know, I'd prefer to take advice on it, but why on earth would we spend time debating something which is like, you know, it's nothing to do with the actual resolution itself. It doesn't change the resolution in any way. It's not an amendment, therefore we don't debate it. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Goodrich?
Yeah, I agree with Councillor Hyman that the actual resolution has not been changed. I have slight problems with the words that are being put forward in the amendment. I mean, yes, you wouldn't disagree with those that can afford it do and those that can't and so on, but practically, it means that everyone's got to, who doesn't want to, who wants to receive the winter fuel allowance has got to be means tested. And the cost of dealing with that in a proper, efficient way with forms and all the other paraphernalia and interviews potentially and financial information being given, it will far outweigh the savings that are being tried to be made by the government. So on a practical basis, any form of means testing will not work. I accept that, and therefore the words at the beginning, although they sound nice, are not practical. And therefore I'm not happy with this amendment. I'm happy that they haven't, that the proposer and seconder are not changing the resolutions that are on, that Councillor Austin has been putting forward. Thank you.
Councillors, we seem to have sort of dichotomy of views as to whether this is a amendment to the motion or an amendment. I would suggest we just move to the vote, if council are happy with that.
No. Sorry, there is a right to
Yeah.
entitlement, so you need to go to councillor Gale, so if she wants a second to speech, then there's a right to
Okay.
councillor Austin.
Fine.
and then
Okay.
and then you can do
Okay,
it.
councillor Gale, you have the right to speak as a seconder, and councillor Austin, you have a right to sum up.
And then
What
councillor
about
Gale.
me?
Yes,
And then,
councillor
do you wish,
Murray.
would any of you like to just waive your right so we can move to the vote?
I'll waive my rights.
Sorry, I'm not waiving mine.
Okay.
I just want to reiterate that first of all, I think this is unnecessary because we're not changing the resolution as per the points made by other councillors. This is a one scheme, one captures all scheme. That is it. It is a universal scheme. There are benefits and disadvantages to it. Means testing costs money. That's why the government have decided not to do it. That's why they've never not done it to date. So I don't think that this is an amendment which is compatible with what I've written in the motion because it's a complete change of course of the motion. Thank you.
Councillor Munro, as the proposer, you have the right to sum up.
Thank you very much. I won't get involved in the procedural stuff because I think it's all been said. I would just like to comment on Councillor Goodrich remarks saying means test is prohibitively expensive and all that. Well, nobody actually knows because it hasn't been done. Means testing is a very common way of trying to get a fair tax. And I see no reason why the government should not be advised to think again and see whether they can devise a fairer system. It may be down the line that it would be too expensive. I don't think it would be, frankly. But in that case, at least we can have an honest view from Whitehall, which will protect those people who desperately need the winter fuel allowance. And save the money, the country an awful lot of money by not giving giving the credit to people who frankly don't need it. I think we've said enough.
Thank you. I hope everybody has seen the amendment. So I would like to move to the vote, please. We will vote electronically.
Can we just clarify that it makes no difference what we vote? The resolution will not change regardless of
Thank
what
you,
we
councillor
vote.
Hyman. We are in the middle of a vote and we're not changing anything.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. That is 7 in favour, 6 abstained and 25 against.
Thank you, Kim. The amendment is therefore lost. Leader, I think you now wish to propose a rather complex amendment.
Well,
for which I hope you have a seconder.
With respect, Mr Mayor, I don't believe my amendment is complex, and members, I'm sure, will be able to judge for themselves in a moment. I do have an amendment that has been circulated to Democratic Services. There is a clean copy and a track changes copy for ease of reference to what has been amended. Yes, I have also put amended notes, but also amended resolutions. I will obviously now request an adjournment for people to absorb it, and I do have a seconder.
Happy to second the motion. Thank you.
Okay, councillors, there is an amendment about to be introduced. We will have a 6-minute break. Would that be sufficient? We'll have a 6-minute break for councillors to view it, think about it, and we will then reconvene. Right, councillors, is everybody reasonably content they've had sufficient time to view what's in front of them? In which case, leader?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Members, I'm very pleased to move this amendment this evening, not because I disagree with the motion's substance, I support it wholeheartedly. However, we can add more here to improve the proposed motion and deliver more on the ground to help residents. Firstly, it's crucial to highlight the somewhat absurd situation in which the government has advanced this policy without a comprehensive impact assessment. To truly comprehend the local implications of this policy, I propose a local impact assessment to bridge this significant gap. This assessment will give us invaluable insights to guide our decisions on the policy's future. What is more challenging is to calculate those vulnerable residents who will feel in an adverse position and make that call between heating and eating out of fear rather than about their accounts. Secondly, we must urgently address the potential risks to vulnerable people. In the digital age, means testing is actually no longer the costly and time-consuming barrier it once was, and certainly compared this when it was introduced back in 2007 by the last Labour government, things have got a lot better. And actually, if you look at things, and this is a slightly ridiculous example, but in Finland, they means test speeding fines because they can process things so quickly using digital information that means testing has not become the barrier it used to be. However, the setup and management of any system of means testing this quickly without harming vulnerable people is a serious concern. And with the impending colder weather, this urgency of this issue cannot be overstated. Without a sensible implementation window and an appropriate mitigation for vulnerable people with short and immediate-term issues, there is likely to be severe impacts in individual cases. And if I might trot out a tired TV cliche at this point, winter is coming. Thirdly, when writing to a Minister of the Crown, I want to make the best use of that time and content, and just flat out asking of policy reversal is unlikely to have any impact. The Office of Budget Responsibility has made it very clear that the budget gap in the UK is substantial, both in their reports immediately after the general election and as recently today in their more regular fiscal and sustainability report that they issue. We should acknowledge this issue that the government has and propose solutions. I hope that if MPs, councils, LGA and other bodies ask the government to reconsider their objections to council tax reforms, revaluation, capital gains tax reforms, business rates reforms and many others, it may have an impact before the next budget. A diverse group of people was actually making this very same point, the most recent of which was actually Lord Cameron in the Laws. It's the very first time I've actually been able to agree with Lord Cameron on almost anything. But other people who agreed with him, for example, include people like Jeremy Corbyn and Peter Mandelson, as well as a bunch of Liberal Democrat MPs. I mean, when all these people agree that other options should be considered, they may possibly just have a point. And of course, many Liberal Democrat, Conservative, and indeed some Labour MPs made the same points in the House of Commons. Now, in addition, I would also like to write to energy providers, inviting them to a discussion about social tariffs. In many countries, vulnerable people are put on such tariffs and not billed at market rate or at all, rendering the need for policies such as winter fuel payments unnecessary. Finally, winter fuels payments are essentially a financial mitigation to a problem that a lot of people have, and it's that their homes are not energy efficient and they're being heated with a price volatile commodity, gas. They often live in poorly insulated homes. This week, the exec, as I mentioned at the beginning of the event tonight, went to visit some homes that we had built that were energy efficient and were not using gas. So for me, we need to reiterate our support for the building of houses just like that by this local authority and lobbying the government to do more through the NPPF and other policy. I'm keen to reiterate that what we're doing in this domain is part of the solution to fuel poverty as a general subject and build local resilience for Waverley and our residents from the whims of both price inflation and state policy. So what I'm actually trying to do here is agree with the basics of the motion. I actually support every word of it. I actually think, though, we can do a lot more locally, and everything I have proposed here is something that we can deliver. Now, I apologise, it might have been better form to bring this round earlier, but I do have to check with officers whether the things I'm proposing in such motions are deliverable, and we are all comfortable that they are. This is something that is common ground across most of the parties in this chamber, and we could have mutually done this together. I'm hoping that my amendments build on what was proposed tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Leader. Does your seconder wish to speak straight away or reserve rights?
I'll reserve my right. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much. Councillors. Councillor Crowe, followed by Councillor Goodrich, followed by Councillor Rivers.
Thank you. Oh, yeah. Me?
Mm-hmm.
Thank you very much. I'm pleased to have the opportunity to speak now because I must admit before I was getting rather confused. I'm very grateful to Councillor Austin for bringing this motion here this evening, and I acknowledge the concerns about the withdrawal of this allowance. I very, very much do, and I think we all do in this chamber. Whilst I acknowledge the concern, but I really must remind Council, however, that there was not much concern when Theresa May attempted similar things in 2017, and I never noted much outrage from the opposition benches in Westminster when people were freezing in their homes and councils had to set up warm banks. And I hope tonight this council will be deploring the fact that the incoming Labour government has been forced to make painful decisions against its natural instincts caused by what the OBR has called the cavernous gap in the public finances. But I'm not going to play politics on this issue anymore, as there is a real problem being identified here. I believe the winter fuel allowance should never have been universal in the first place. Notwithstanding, I too am deeply concerned about those who are just above the pension credit threshold, including those who suffer from disability and have high energy needs. These groups, over 2 million people, will be severely impacted by this decision. Of course, it is a good thing that the publicity generated by the withdrawal of this allowance has resulted in more applications for pension credit, but it takes weeks and weeks for this to be assessed, meanwhile leaving the vulnerable unsure as to whether they will receive it at all. And there is an acknowledgement, even from the government, that all those entitled to pension credit will still not even bother to apply because of the difficulties with that process. I submit that this government, my government, urgently needs to undertake a proper impact assessment and rethink the eligibility criteria for this allowance. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Goodrich, followed by Councillor Rivers.
Mr. Mayor, I won't be supporting this amendment. Two main reasons. I don't see why this council should be paying for a local impact assessment. And has the leader worked out what's that going to cost our council taxpayers to do it when the government should have been doing it? And secondly, a reason I don't like under council believes the last bullet point on the first page. We can debate ad nauseam about the 22 million alleged gap in public finances. And we've heard from Jeremy Hunt that this was absolutely not the case when he handed over to Labour, and we can debate it one way or another, but I am not prepared to put my name to that propaganda at the bottom of that page, so I'm going to vote against.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Rivers, followed by Councillor Keane.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm speaking in support of the motion's last resolution, the one around reiterating our support for sustainable energy efficient housing buildings. I am pleased to note that our Fabric First approach to new builds and retrofits in Oxford Ridge in Godalming, the ones focusing on sustainable energy sources and insulation, was visited by the Lord Lieutenant Michael Moore Molyneux last Friday. He was truly amazed with what he saw and wished that his own house, Loseley Park, had been built that way. I'm assuming Loseley Park is a Band H property. But besides that, he was especially pleased to meet with some of our tenants and to hear from them of the benefits they received from our sustainable approach in constructing their houses. And of course, I say, may we continue to deal with the root cause of fuel poverty by carrying on building this way. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Keane, followed by Councillor Merriweather.
May point of order, please, Mr. Mayor.
Which law or rule do you think has been broken?
This is none of our council's business, Mr. Mayor. It really isn't this council's business, and we shouldn't be employing people to stay late at night in order to discuss something which isn't our council's business. It's the government's business, and it really isn't our business.
I don't think that is a point of order, Councillor Hyman, so please carry on.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, I will be supporting this amendment. I like the fact that Councillor Rivers has highlighted the fact that people are very pleased to be living in the houses that we are building. But we must remember that there are lots of pensioners and people with disabilities living under cold homes. And also, the sad thing about this whole debacle is that the pension credit is set so low that so many of our pensioners will never be able to obtain it. I can tell you now that I know of two. One was £1 over and the second one was £2 over, and they couldn't have the pension credit and they were heartbroken. So it's a failure of this government to actually do this vindictive thing to our pensioners who have worked all their lives and supported this country, and they are now going to suffer for it. So the other point to make is that applying for this pension credit is terribly detailed. And I can tell you that there are pensioners that have tried and given up because they don't understand the forms. So it's not just about means testing, because, and I do agree with that, but you'll get to the stage where pensioners still will not benefit from this pension credit. And I think it is a shame. So I will support this amendment, and I hope that everybody will do the same.
Thank you. Councillor Merriweather, followed by Councillor MacLeod.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Listen, it's not necessarily just the failure of this government, it's the failure of successive governments. We have a housing stock which needs heating because it isn't properly insulated. And we have an energy market price-wise that isn't fit for purpose because there are no social tariffs. Instead, we have this, procedurally is just a gimmick. Which can be means tested. The simplest way to means test the winter fuel payment is to tax it, is to make it taxable rather than tax-free. That by definition, that makes it means testing. Instead, we've got this proposal which is highly regressive, particularly punitive for those residents who are unable to claim pension credit or who fall within pennies, pounds of the limit that the pension credit is set at. So, it is very unpalatable. We have a market that's failing. We have a housing stock that's failing, and the winter fuel payment system was nothing more than a very rough plaster over all of those structural failures. For our residents, I think we do need the evidence, whether it's provided by the government or whether we have to do it ourselves. I think it is a service that we provide to our residents to find out how many of them are going to be affected and by how much. And I think it is our job in the failure of the government to step in and inform them as to the support that is available and how to go out and get it. No one wants to be in this position, but if Westminster isn't up for the job, I think the grown-ups actually have to step up and do it instead.
Thank you. I have Councillor MacLeod, and then if no one else puts their hand up, I will ask the seconder if they wish to. You're all right. You can speak. Councillor Coburn. Have you spoken to the amendment? No. No. Okay. Councillor Coburn after Councillor MacLeod.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. To my mind, this is a sad situation, and I'm not a member of the Labour Party, but I do wish the government well, actually, and think in many ways they've made a good start in what they've done, and they come across to me as a serious government trying to do serious things. But they've made a very bad mistake in what they're doing here, actually. And one of the problems with politicians and Westminster politicians, they're very reluctant to make what they think are U-turns. So it's not going to be easy to persuade them to change their mind. But I think we should do our best to do so in the interests of the government as well as in the interests of the pensioners. So I was actually supportive of Councillor Austin's original amendments, and I do support the changes recommended by the leader as improvements. I just wanted to make two specific small points, actually, because I've done a fair bit of reading on this. In terms of the point about the first bullet point in the original amendment, where it refers to the pensions credit, there's actually 7 benefits, in fact, that entitled, so I think it's 6, including the pensions credit, which entitle pensioners to get them into fuel payment. So I think actually we should be referring to all 7, and we should be encouraging people to apply for all these benefits, not just winter fuel payment. So that's my first fairly factual point. My second point, actually, in terms of the original second point, where we're asking the leader to write to the Chancellor of the Exchequer, I'm not totally sure that that was originally phrased absolutely clearly, and I don't think it's totally clear in the amendment either. I asked the question, are we asking the Chancellor to review it and retain the winter fuel payment for all pensioners? Because I don't actually agree with that. I receive this payment. I don't need it. I don't think it's necessary. I don't actually want it. I know it's difficult to introduce means testing. It can be expensive, etc. But Martin Lewis came up with a suggestion, a fairly simple suggestion. I don't know whether it would work. You could relate it to council tax bans. There must be other simple things that we can do that would mean not everybody would have to get the full payment, but the poor people, there's 11.5 million people entitled to it. On the government's method, only 1.5 million will actually get it, and perhaps another 800,000 who could get it by getting the additional benefits. But there must be something that we can do so that perhaps half the people who currently get it, would still be entitled to it, and the top half, if you like, of the 11.5 million wouldn't get it. So I haven't got any exact answers for that, but I think we need to be clear in what we're asking the Chancellor to do. Are we asking them to retain the thing for everybody, or we're asking to come up with a scheme that only the vulnerable people, all vulnerable people will still be able to get it? That wasn't totally clear to me in Councillor Austin's initial suggestion, and it's still not clear to me in the revise, which is based on her original wording. So I'd like to know, what are we asking? Are we asking them to retain it completely? Or are we asking them to come up with a new scheme? Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. For clarity as to where we're going, everybody, I have Councillor Coburn down as the next speaker. If no one else particularly wants to speak, I then have the seconder of the amendment speaking. I then have the proposer of the substantive motion, Councillor Austin, speaking, and finally a summing up by the proposer of the amendment. So, Councillor Coburn.
Well, I'm very disappointed, but not remotely surprised, that we've turned what was meant to be a very simple, non-political motion to show our support for the pensioners in this borough. That was all it was about, to show our support for Age UK, to show our support for all those pensioners who have been getting in touch with us, and the ones we know anyway, because we help them on a regular basis. And we've turned it into, let's have a go at every government. Let's solve all the problems of the future. Let's get on with it. This is now. These people are going to be cold now because they're not going to get this allowance. Okay, it's going to 1 or 2 people who don't need it. They can do with it as they will. But we don't have time to put all these other things in motion before these people are going to be cold in their homes. Yes, we want to improve all their homes. We can't do it before Christmas. And it's going to get blooming cold before Christmas. I was cold all last week, let alone December. And I'm just so cross that we have to turn everything in this council chamber into some party political rant when all a simple motion like this is trying to do is show the support. Excuse me, we are supposed to treat each other with respect.
Please, that's right. You're not speaking.
And how have I been not respectful to you?
Can we not enter into a cross-channel debate?
Right. Well, what I'm saying is that this original motion, read the wording, it has nothing to do with politics. It has everything to do with supporting the vulnerable people in this borough, showing now that all of us in this chamber support them, that we care about them, that we're going to go to Age UK, we're going to do what we can with the local authorities, not 6 months down the line, not 2 years down the line, but now. And I think what we've got now is this mismatch of policy. I don't disagree with what is proposed ultimately, but I think it goes completely against the spirit of this motion, which was just to say, look, enough's enough. We've got so many poor people in this country who are really going to suffer. We cannot stand by and do nothing now. Let's do something. And okay, it's not going to change the world, but it might just make somebody rethink. If you don't try, you'll never know, will you? But how disappointing this has turned into a party political rant.
I have Councillor Long.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think all of us in this room are in support of supporting our vulnerable pensioners. But what is the point of showing support without action underpinning that? I'll be supporting the amendment in order to underpin the support that we all have expressed tonight and with action to improve their situation as well as saying that we support them.
Thank you. I see no more hands. So would the seconder wish to speak?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and you'll be pleased to hear that I'll be as brief as I possibly can. In supporting the amendment, I would like to begin by paying tribute to the substance of Councillor Austin's original motion and the urgency expressed just now by Councillor Coburn. Quite frankly, I'm amazed that the government has gone down this road. However, in my opinion, simply opposing the government's policy is not enough. As a proactive council, we should be seen to offer alternative options. And in my opinion, this is what the amendment does. This council is already committed to having initiatives that seek to tackle the root cause of fuel poverty, and Councillor Rivers has already made reference to those. And what this amendment highlights is further additional options. It does not seek to belittle Councillor Austin's motion, far from it. It looks to support and, in my opinion, enhance it. And as a result, I will be voting for the amendment.
Thank you. Councillor Austin, you have the right to speak before the mover of the amendment sums up. So the floor is yours.
Thank you. I'll take this one seated because I'm full of cold and I need to go home soon. I'd like to thank all of you for your comments in support of this motion. And I note the comments that you have made. Sadly, this motion the amendment has now substantially changed, politicised what was meant to be a non-political support motion. And the leader has chosen to do that in such a way as he knows it will not be acceptable for the Conservative Council Group to accept these amendments. I feel very saddened. I think it's a great shame that we can't, just be gracious sometimes and accept these things. Well, all I would say is, well done you to the leader. But are you doing the right thing by for our residents by doing this? I feel not. So for me, you have my confirmation on behalf of our council group that we will do every single thing that we can to support Age UK, to support our elderly and those at risk in our borough. We won't be supporting this amendment, but you have my confirmation. I will be writing to the Chancellor on behalf of my council group with the wording of my motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Leader, would you like to sum up?
I would. Disappointment's a word that's been used a lot in the last 20 minutes. I mean, this isn't a question and answer session, but which bits don't you like? Support building housing that deals with fuel poverty, doing an impact assessment that the government hasn't done so we can find out how many people are having issues because of fuel poverty here and help them. exploring issues with energy companies to see if there are ways to reduce their reliance upon winter fuel payments. I thought this was a debate about highlighting issues about fuel poverty. Please also note that I haven't taken anything that you guys suggested out of the motion. There's nothing about not doing these or doing that bit. I've literally agreed to do all the things that you said, plus a few things to actually help people on the ground. So this obviously isn't the Q&A bit, but I mean, I think it's a reasonable question that people may ask after this, is which bits of what I was proposing here did you actually not agree with? But just go to the details of some of the things that were asked. Councillors conduct impact assessments on things all the time. And honestly, I think our officers are quite capable of finding out about fuel poverty in our area. Now, one thing, even if they were able to do nothing else, they can certainly establish it for our own social tenants at 5,000 properties in Waverley. Even if we can't help anybody else, at least we'll know a bit more about them and how we can help them. I was asked during the general election to go and meet Citizens Advice South West Surrey. I was the only candidate in that election that actually went and did that. And they actually explained to me about social tariffs while I was there, because it's an area where there's a lot of back and forth about winter fuel payments, but not a lot of debate about how we deal with the root causes and about how we actually combat fuel poverty. So for me, the substance of my amendment here was, let's make the point to the government. Let's try and do it constructively and, you know, raise some of the issues in the background. But yeah, let's sign your petition and let's write your letter. Personally, don't think it's going to keep people warm though. And actually, I want to try and help them with some things that we can do. And just to respond to Councillor Hyman, this absolutely is our business. And the reason it's our business is because we have actual levers here to help people in fuel poverty, many of which I've outlined, and they are within our powers. Just to respond to Councillor MacLeod before I really do conclude, my understanding of the original motion from Councillor Austin was that there is a request for me to write to the Chancellor of the Exchequer. And the point sheet, the original wording was urging a review of the decision to means test winter fuel payment, which I've retained the wording of 100%, merely added the words as soon as practicable, because honestly, I think as soon as practical here probably means the next budget. Now, there are a number of things I've outlined that the government has ruled out considering in terms of revenue raising. And just to reflect on the point that Councillor Fairclough made, I am not writing to a Minister of the Crown to just say, we don't like this, stop it. I want to give options and solutions as part of that, because there is a budget gap. I mean, the OBR is not necessarily known for its propaganda. It's actually an agency of the Treasury. So, I mean, we can all sit here and say that it's, lying or whatever you want to say. It's the Office of Budget Responsibility, which, by the way, I believe was set up by a Conservative Chancellor of the Exchequer to make these kind of comments. So from my point of view, please vote for this amendment if you want to make the point to the government, you want to support what Age UK are doing, but you also want to use all of our powers and resources to try and actually help people deal with the causes of fuel poverty and engage with the government on winter fuel payments. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor and members.
Thank you, Leader. I do not propose to read out the whole thing to you, as you all have it printed in front of you. So we will now move to the electronic vote, please. Mind you, you are voting on the amendment, not the main event. So you are voting on the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That's 25 in favour, 4 abstentions and 9 against.
Thank you very much. The amendment is therefore carried and the amended resolution becomes the substantive resolution which we are now free to debate. This means that those who have spoken to the amendment are more than welcome to speak to the new substantive motion, but having heard what's been said, I sincerely hope that there will be very little said, because I think most of it's all been said, and anything which we wish to say, could we please say as succinctly as possible? Does your seconder wish to speak straight away, or do you wish to reserve rights a bit further?
The only thing I would suggest, Mr. Mayor, is that we move straight to the vote, but there you go.
Councillors, if no hands go up,
Can I call a recorded vote, I'm afraid, please? Sorry.
Yes, yeah. Okay, no one else wishes to speak, but Councillor Austin, you have the right to sum up at the end, should you so wish, and should you manage to speak.
As it just doesn't, it's not my motion anymore. It's completely different from what I was going to what the intention of what I said was. So I don't really know what I have to say. I would just also just point out the bit that Councillor MacLeod actually did point out rightly was about where are we? The decision to oh God, there's so much red on here now. Request the leader rights to Chancellor of the Exchequer. The point of that is that we urge a review of the decision. Now, it's not up to us right now. It's up to the Chancellor to decide what to do. So I can't foresee what that is going to be. So that is why the question is worded that way. I just forgotten to say that in the previous bit, so I might as well say it now. Just to reiterate my utter disappointment that we can't move beyond petty politics for this. Thank you.
Thank you. I heard a request for a recorded vote. I saw no other people supporting it. 1, 2, okay, that is enough. We will have a recorded vote then. Could you please arrange a roll call?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillors, when I call your name, please state whether you wish to vote for, to vote against, or to abstain. Councillor Austin. Councillor Barker-Lomax.
Against.
Councillor Beeman.
Abstain.
Councillor Busby.
For.
Councillor Cavaliere.
For.
Councillor Coburn.
Against.
Councillor Crowe. Councillor Davidson.
For.
Councillor Denis. Councillor Deuce.
For.
Councillor Earwaker.
Abstain.
Councillor Fairclough.
For.
Councillor Follows.
For.
Councillor Gale.
Abstain.
Councillor Goodridge.
Against.
Councillor Higgins.
For.
Councillor Keane.
For.
Councillor Keel.
For.
Councillor Long.
For.
Councillor MacLeod. Councillor Merriweather. Councillor Morrison.
For.
Councillor Munro.
Abstain.
Councillor Murray.
For.
Councillor Nicholson. Councillor Paul Rivers.
For.
Councillor Penny Rivers.
For.
Councillor Rubini.
For.
Councillor Spence.
For.
Councillor Staunton.
Against.
Councillor Steiger.
For.
Councillor Sullivan.
Against.
Councillor Philip Townsend. Mr. Mayor.
For.
Councillor White. Councillor White.
For. Sorry.
Councillor Wicks.
Abstain.
Councillor Williams.
For.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. There are 25 votes for, there are 7 votes against, and there were 5 abstentions.
Councillors, the motion as amended is therefore carried. And I believe that brings us to the end of this evening's business. So I declare council closed.